Welcome to a new season of the Green Pill podcast. We are exploring this season how we can use technology, community, and new forms of coordination to build, fund, and accelerate what matters in the mid 21st century. This season, I talk with builders, thinkers, and innovators who are pushing on the edges of what's possible, from on chain capital allocation to Ethereum to AI alignment to reimagining markets and governance. Together, we will uncover how these ideas can move us closer to a world that's improving every week, month, or quarter, what we call protopia, a preferable, realistic future that is constantly improving through small incremental changes over time. If you want to learn more, visit our website at greenpill.network, where you can download the Green Pill books for free, play with some of our ecosystem projects, join the Telegram, or participate in the network. All right, new season of Green Pill. Let's get at it. Today on the podcast, we're diving into the future of AI, markets, and human flourishing with Joe Edelman. Joe is the founder of the Meaning Alignment Institute and the author of Full Stack Alignment Paper, which asks a provocative question: how do we design AI in institutions that don't just maximize clicks or profit, but actually preserve or enhance human values? We'll explore the ideas of thick models of value, market intermediaries in a post-AGI world, and what it would mean to coordinate society where AI moves faster than democracy. Joe has written extensively about how markets, intermediaries, and democratic institutions might evolve in a post-AGI world, emphasizing the importance of designing mechanisms that respect human flourishing rather than just optimizing proxies like clicks or revenue. This is a really exciting episode. I think Joe is one of my favorite thinkers on the subject of AI alignment, and he's just such a galaxy brain. The publishing of this paper, I think that Joe's putting some really interesting ideas out there, and at a great time, because I think these are ideas that are ready for the network of builders that we have in the Green Pill network and the Ethereum ecosystem to start working on. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode with Joe Edelman. Hey, Joe, how's it going? You want to kick us off with an intro?
I am the founder and principal investigator at the Meaning Alignment Institute, where I currently lead a kind of a research network of people, mostly academics at universities, also a fair number of researchers at the big labs, especially Google DeepMind, some other, and a couple people at Meta, Anthropic, OpenAI. And we research this thing that I guess we'll get to talking about, which is full stack alignment. We just put a paper about that. It's an approach to co-aligning AI and institutions. So it's very relevant to mechanism designers and people that want to rethink things like markets and voting and so on, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with.
Yeah.
And I was, before working on fixing AI and institutions, it was social media. And I was one of the people that started the Center for Humane Tech, if you know what that is. And before that, I was in startups.
Great. So could you talk a little bit about the why here? Why does it matter to have meaning alignment, to have AI alignment, to have alignment? Why does that matter to you, and why do you think that matters to the audience?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really matters. Um, one thing at a very high level is the more powerful tech you have, the more clear you have to be about where to point it. And with AI, that also involves a lot of collective action kind of things. Like if we disagree about where to point it, then we have to have the AI models themselves need to understand us to a greater degree to know what's good for us than previous tech. And you can already see this misalignment with social media where they don't really understand us, and the misalignment leads to real problems. But as the AI gets more powerful, that needs to be more precise. But then we have bigger problems where people disagree, where it's about finding consensus, things like that. And I think in general, powerful AI, especially AGI or ASI, puts a kind of pressure on all of our institutions that we're not ready for. So you end up needing to fix the institutions. Otherwise, the institutions will, like markets, for instance, will point powerful AI in a way that ends up being in a direction that ends up being bad for humanity. Same with governments, militaries, large organizations, etc.
As I was doing my research for this episode, I came across your pinned tweet that said a big part of why AI is threatening is market forces. Just look at what the attention economy did to social media, or the short-term wins of LLM sycophancy, or the product races among AI labs, or the markets for AI girlfriends and boyfriends. That hit me viscerally when I read that, because I think that you were sort of pointing to the past in order to show us a little bit of what the future can look like. But I'm wondering if, since you were involved in the Center for Humane Technology and spent some time on social media, if you could just tell us what you think went wrong with social media, or what is still going wrong, and maybe that'll ground us a little bit more in the why before we move on to the paper.
Yeah. I mean, you can sort of say it at several different levels, and it's worth pointing out the different levels. So, at the lowest level, social media recommenders aren't tuned to what we really value, what's really important to us, even as individuals. They're tuned to our engagement mostly. And that's yeah, so that's kind of like level zero. And you can make a recommender that's tuned to something else. And so one reason that happens is just because engagement metrics are very easy to measure. And if you're getting upvotes or likes or whatever, I think that's what, for instance, the sycophancy of ChatGPT 4.0 was largely because of upvotes in RLHF and in the user feedback mechanisms that they have in ChatGPT that loop back into the post-training loop. So sometimes it's just the easiest thing to measure that seems like it's a good signal of what would be good for users is not really such a good signal of what's good for users. But then we have these levels on top of that, like the companies need to maintain market share. And if they don't keep you scrolling and you end up going to some other app and scrolling there, then they're going to lose advertising revenue. They're going to lose market share. And that's a problem for the company's bottom line, which is also misaligned with you. And then you have things like bonus structures inside the social media companies where somebody's getting, their kids' college tuition or their retirement is tied somehow to the engagement numbers going up, which is that, right? So that's like another layer, and so there's all these different layers at which the incentives are not necessarily lined up with what's really good for people. And I think you have to kind of, that's why we call it full stack alignment. You have to kind of fix this at all the layers, or adjust things at all the layers to end up with something that's better for people.
So it feels like there's a couple layers of alignment. At the very base, just you can only manage what you can measure. And then there's sort of like a Moloch trap, a multipolar trap on top of that, around how do we keep people engaged in an attention economy. And then beyond that, there's incentive structures that are built around that in the capital structure of these companies. That would be my reductionist summary of what you just said.
Yeah, yeah, and that's like three, but there's more. There's regulators. There's, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm curious to just kind of put a pin in those, and then maybe come back to some of those and see if they're just, if they're similar or the same, or they rhyme when we get into AI. So maybe this can serve as a jumping off point into the paper, which I'm really excited to get into. So can you introduce the paper to the audience?
The paper is about the problem of full stack alignment, which is the problem I more or less just described, and a tool that can be used to solve it with LLMs, or to hopefully solve it, which we call thick models of value. So this is just richer representations of what's important to people. And there's some toolkits that we give in section 3 of the paper about how to, for instance, interview someone and get a much richer sense of what's meaningful to that individual person. And once you can do that, you can turn that into a metric. You can roll up what's meaningful to several people into a kind of a product success metric, or an objective function that you tune an ML algorithm to, or a bonus structure inside a company or whatever. You could make a bonus structure for giving, for delivering on what's actually meaningful to the users, et cetera. So this is kind of like a new piece of philosophy and technology and practical survey methodology for combating the full stack alignment problem.
Great. I'm really curious to get into those areas, but I'm wondering if we could first critique the current dominant approaches to AI alignment. I think that you criticize them as being too shallow. Could you take us into that a little bit before we get into the full stack alignment piece?
Yeah, so probably many of your readers are familiar with RLHF. This was kind of like the first layer of shaping model behavior according to user preferences. This is when you fine tune a model based on a series of preferences, like users prefer this answer to this answer.
And just to interject, RLHF stands for reinforcement learning from human feedback, which kind of tells you what it is for the members of the audience who aren't familiar with that.
Yeah. And so this is how the first chat models that everybody used, this is how ChatGPT 3.5 was, and 3 was fine tuned mostly. There are big problems with this, and so the industry has been kind of moving off of it. So one is it's like very unclear from this set of examples what exactly you're trying to tell the model. All you have are the examples, and they could include things about writing style mixed with things about how flattering the model is being towards the user, mixed with things about it could even be that users prefer things that are factually inaccurate. Like
Mhm.
you don't really know. You just have this kind of big bag of examples, and
Uh,
so it's really unclear what it says. Mhm.
would it be correct to presume that RLHF is where AI sycophancy comes from? The sort of like
Yeah,
glazing you in the responses?
that's right, yeah, and that's one of the many reasons that people have that the labs have been moving away from it as, like, a predominant alignment technique. Unfortunately, what they've been moving towards is what we also critique in the paper, which we call values as text, which is just textual descriptions of what they think good, model behavior would be, for instance, and often these are very vague. Like, if you look at so constitutional AI is one kind of, values as text fine-tuning. And if you look at Claude's constitution, it's things like the model should be fair, the model should be
Yeah.
inclusive, um, and no one really knows what that means either. So, and also it seems to like if you remember this thing that happened at Google where there was like the images were like weirdly diverse for a
Yeah.
while. There's a lot of failures that come from the fact that you're sort of telling the model to do something without really having a clear idea even what you're telling it.
Mhm.
And so this ends up being another problem. And ends up being a really deep problem because uh, it's easy to say the word inclusive, but trying to get deep into what our values are and say something much more rich is actually kind of a state of the art problem. And
Yeah.
that's some of what we take on in this paper.
It feels like there's maybe the abstractness of language is maybe one problem here where, if you think thousands of years ago, language evolved so that I could tell you, hey, there's a saber-toothed tiger right behind you. That's something very concrete. That means something that has an evolutionary pressure to help us survive. But then when you get into things like fairness and love, there are these abstract things where, my representation might not even be the same as your representation. And so maybe there's a wedge that misalignment can come in through that. And maybe there's also a wedge when you give two abstract ideals and they're diametrically opposed to each other. And these feel like they're just fundamental flaws to the constitutional approach to me. I don't know if you would agree with those two things being fundamental flaws, but that's sort of what comes up to me as in making this relatable, a flaw of this approach.
Yeah, I think that's you summed it up well. And I guess the important thing to say is that it's not it's a problem with using these abstract words, but there are much richer ways to understand what people care about if you can either watch them decide something in detail, like watch them navigate their own love,
Mhm. Like chain of
like
thought kind of stuff.
yeah, so you can watch how people think about love or fairness. You can ask them about a situation in which they tried hard to be fair and what were they actually doing. You can get deeper than the word fairness or the word love. And it's important to do that. And that's some of what we call thick models of value in the paper.
Okay. Well, yeah, let's move into where you think this is all going. So, what are thick models of value? What's your proposed solution to full stack alignment?
Yeah. So we describe several different ways of making thick models of value in the paper. Um, one so we talk about modeling two things, values and norms. Norms are like things that we all agree on that or that are how we want society to be. Values are more about how we personally make decisions and how we would want our, for instance, AI agents to make decisions for us. So both of these things can be investigated deeply, and there's interview structures, there's ways of watching human behavior and gathering this kind of information from it. And we talk about different, you can think about it, grammars or type systems for representing these kinds of things. And once you pick one or two, you can put it at multiple levels of society. So you can say the model should understand, how people want to live on a deep level and support them in living that way. And the company also should include in its product success metric or its bonus structures some of the same. criteria, right? And a thick model of value, that's not how things usually work. Like usually the model has this very rich, like every conversation it's trying to do something different for you. And the bonus structure is just like daily active users or something. It's totally different. Right. So full stack alignment means having some consonants, having some way for these thick models of value to travel between levels, so that they don't get lost as they go up the stack, so that the same reasons that the user is coming or what the user really cares about end up being reflected in the business metrics, end up being reflected ideally in investment structures, like on top of the business, regulatory structures on top of the business. And I think this is what, for instance, I think Mark Zuckerberg has been called in front of Congress 8 times, um, and they always seem angry, and they're like, "Oh, Facebook is not, or Instagram or whatever. It's not good for society somehow." But they kind of don't know why, um, and they can't ever say, "Well, this is what connection should mean." And this is what connection means in your, in your product metric or whatever. And these aren't the same thing, right? That's what Congress, I think, wants to say. But they don't have the thick models of value in this case. They don't have the rich understanding of why the users come,
Mhm.
to point to that discrepancy. And so you can see that, like, if you could know why users come in this very thick way, you could then build all sorts of structures to support that in a kind of a high integrity way across the stack.
So it feels like thick models of value are about making values norms and their justifications more legible across the entire stack so that they can transfer up and down the stack. That's a little bit reductionist, but that's the main thing that I took away there.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
Um, just to probe at that a little bit, and this is something that I struggle with in my work, is that um, as a manager of a company, I know what's best, or I think I know what's best for my users. I think I know what the thick models of value are, the regenerative, positive sum ecosystem that we want to create. But I may have investors or shareholders over here who only want a thin model of value, and that's profit. And so how do you think about building legibility between the thick models of value and the capitalist system, which is expecting? I mean, our whole political economy is built on exponential returns, and so is there a case to be made to the capitalist class that the thick models of value actually produce more healthy companies, and therefore, the whole system of bonuses and rewards can be steered towards the thick models of value? How do you think about building a shim between those two things?
I mean, I think it depends on what kind of economy you want. I don't think that thick models of value or full stack alignment are in contradiction to growth at all.
Okay.
But I do think there's kind of very different end games we could have depending on how we structure the economy. I mean, you could look at a good example would be health care regulation, health insurance, this kind of stuff, right? Like we try to shape health insurance and the regulatory structures there so that most of the investment goes in actually improving lives, right? And if there was no regulation there, we would end up with a different economy, which was more about like medical quackery, right? And exploitation. And both of those can be very high growth regimes, right? And the question is like what's being rewarded. Um, so I think what we want is to build a structure where there's a high growth regime that's actually about better lives. And I think you end up in really, I feel like it's very bimodal with powerful AI, even with social media. In one mode, it looks very much like Ready Player One or Wall-E, like very passive users. Maybe they're wearing VR headsets in their pod, and you're selling them kind of experience economy, like pay per play, AI girlfriend minutes or, a virtual gift or something like that. That like, and that's the economy, right? And that could look like a big economy, but I think it's not really an economy of innovation. It's not the world we want to live in, right? When people talk about hard tech or different kinds of investors talk about what they're into, very few of them say, you know, I I want I want the pod economy, right? From these dystopian movies. Um, but to avoid that, I think we need we need some integrity that we don't have in the system currently. And that means we need investment structures that reward the right stuff. And we have a design we call market intermediaries, which are intermediary AI intermediaries that sit between users and software suppliers or other kinds of suppliers, and build contracts that sort of have to do with the flourishing of those users, and enforce that by like watching the whole interaction, um, and making sure that the users get the kinds of flourishing that they came to those service providers for.
Mhm.
Um, so we need structures like that, or we'll just end up in a kind of a with much more of a virtual kind of economy of passivity, even than we have now.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, that makes sense. Healthcare is a hard example for me to get my head around being in the United States, but that's a rabbit hole we can leave for another episode. But I mean, I think the point taken is that in order to make these values manageable, first we have to make them measurable and we have to make them legible. And I think from there you can build you can build more full stack aligned AI companies, and then I think from there it's making sure that those companies are the ones that perform well in the market so that the incentive structure shifts over to them. I would love to sort of shift us back to the paper and to talk about the different application areas that you suggest. The Green Pill audience is very builder focused, and so if I'm a builder that's interested in AI alignment and doing work in this area, what are the application areas that you propose in the paper, and how can I get involved?
So there's now like 4 moonshots, more or less, that we're trying to organize people towards, and mostly we're trying to publish papers in these areas. But there's a lot of opportunity to build in some kind of example market, some kind of test market, kind of like Gitcoin has with quadratic funding, and then also publish a paper about it, and gain we can gain legitimacy that way. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to build and test. And part of what we do is pair like form teams that can do this, that can write the paper, but also do the test, maybe have access to the test market, maybe have access to relevant compute or data, and maybe have the relevant philosophical expertise to do the thick models of value thing, et cetera. Right. So we build kind of cross-functional teams. And we especially want to build teams for these 4 moonshots. So I'll tell you what they are. One of them we call the super negotiator. So this is an AI that's better at negotiation, at deal making. The idea is that already we see a lot of contracts written or by 2 agents in say the deal flow departments at J.P. Morgan, places like that, right? So an agent and agent are trying to figure out what the deal is between 2 people, or between an organization and another organization, or country and another country in the future. And we want to make it so those deals have as much upside for the parties as possible, right? So there's a lot of potential disasters in this direction, and a lot of potential almost utopian outcomes. Because if you look at deal flow in finance, for instance, you see some regulation that keeps kind of Machiavellian or manipulative behavior, market manipulations from happening, but you don't see a lot of deals that are just like incredibly good because they take into account background values on both sides. They're really innovative about how both sides can help each other, right? Like in general, AI doesn't make those kinds of deals currently. People sometimes do. People enter into partnerships where they find incredible upside. But wouldn't it be great if AI did, and if it could, invent treaties that have much more upside than current international treaties, and other kinds of business deals, ways of managing property, et cetera, right? So that's one, the super negotiator. And we have a project list that I can share a link to as part of this, where we give kind of more information about how one might train a super negotiator, what kind of data you'd need, what kind of test audiences you'd use to show that it works better than the state of the art, and so on. So that's one. Another of these moonshots we call a public resource regulator. So this is This is a democratic system. We did put out an interesting democratic structure called moral graph elicitation. We have a paper about that. And one of the things moral graph elicitation does is it gathers the values of a whole community and then tries to make decisions or policies based on them. And we think you could go much further with this. So any group of people that maybe like a group of houses that live around a lake or a DAO that have a shared resource that they are managing together, um, they could have an AI agent that's regulating the use of that thing, um, and doing it with all of their values in mind. Um, so this is like another of these moonshots. There's two more. Should I pause or should I go on?
Yeah, I mean, I think let's go through them all together, and then I think I want to probe at one at once we've got them all on the table. So yeah, keep going.
Cool. Number three is this thing that I hinted at before, market intermediaries. This is a way of doing contracting in markets with AI around human flourishing goals. So if you think about the market for gym memberships or yoga studios or things like that, when you do business with these things, you don't usually mention your like related flourishing goal, right? You might go to yoga class because you want community or you want some kind of spiritual connection, but that's not in the contract, right? And so market intermediaries interview users about what they want, write contracts that kind of uh, actually get into the weeds about the outcomes that really matter to those users, and also help the providers think about risk when it comes to actually taking on these like deeper needs. So they reallocate risk between the providers and the users. Currently, the user kind of like if you join a gym, it's kind of on you to go to the gym and get fit. The gym doesn't lose anything at all if you don't. Um, this kind of shifts risk a little bit in the gym's direction, but not so much
Mm.
that the gym would not want you to join.
Right.
Um, so that's the market intermediary. It also bundles users so that they can have solidarity effects. So that like, you pay more if your whole family gets fit, for instance.
The, the thing I saw this called in the paper, is, value stewardship agents, and I just wanna note that the word intermediary is a little bit of a dirty word in crypto because the implication is that they're extractive intermediaries, but I like the phrase value stewardship agents a little bit more.
Cool. Yeah. We use those a little differently, but
Oh, okay.
sorry,
Well,
sorry, crypto people. This intermediary is good. um,
okay.
I
A
yeah
value
that
add
that
intermediary, we'd call them, yeah.
oh sure,
Okay,
cool.
well, it was just
Uh,
since I brought us there, can you just very briefly, so I don't confuse the audience, the difference between an intermediary and a value stewardship agent, are those are 2 different things?
Yeah, so the value stewardship agent is just something that actually represents you well. So right now, when you tell ChatGPT agent or something to go do something, it doesn't operate for very long on your behalf. So it's like not so important that it understands what you would really do in each situation, where you would have reservations, where you would not like work with that particular supplier because they they don't match your values or something like that, right? So what we want is agents that can really reliably make decisions that really impress you based on their understanding of your values, and that also don't try to manipulate your values, but just really get them. That's the value stewardship agent, and that's the fourth moonshot.
Okay, great. Um, so I think that the opportunity for builders, and this is the thing that I really want to zero in on, is to actually be people who are building proof of concept systems for these different ideas. And I think there's a huge upside to have people who are out there in the arena building things, to have a relationship with people who are doing the writing of academic papers and the sort of a priori thinking here. Can you say a little bit about what you'd like to see from the audience of green pill builders and the kind of builders that I hang out with? You know, what would a good proof of concept look like? And do you have RFPs or sort of like a list of requirements or criteria that you'd like to see built in these areas?
Yeah, so we have a doc on our wiki that I can share. It's called Full Stack Alignment Project List. Not such an inspiring name. Um, and so you can look at that. And what we want to do is build cross-functional teams. So, if there are academics in the audience, just come at me with a paper proposal. But if you're somebody that might want to work with an academic, then maybe read some of these papers that I'm mentioning, and write me with what you think, or write one of us with what you think you could bite off. And if it could be that if you're a founder and you have a market that really needs one of these things, or that would be a great test market for one of these things, that would be another reason to write. And our plan is to put together, a mix of people to make each of these, to build each of these as quickly as possible, but also to show the world how good they are and how important they are, so that we can start to reorient society around mechanisms like these.
Mhm. Well, that would be my goal for the episode is if I can connect you with people who are out there in the arena doing building here. And, I think it's quite a beautiful thing that we've got people who are interested in regenerative building out here in the Green Pill audience. And if they could get connected with you and actually put something together, I think there'd be something rather beautiful there. And I think that you're working on something that's really important to the Green Pill ethos and to the regenerative ethos. And so I hope people feel that purpose. And the fact that there's an opportunity for anyone in the internet to get involved in this, I think is something special. It feels like AI is happening in these research labs, the open AIs, the Anthropics, the Googles, those type of places. And the fact that you're building something that's across those institutions, I think is really special.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's necessary to, like, if you want to shift the zeitgeist or change how things are going, you really need to build a consensus across all the
Mhm.
labs and academic institutions, startups, etc.
Yeah. So if you're maximally successful, what does the world look like in 10 years?
Well, I think it's going to be a mess still, because it's going to be a crazy 10 years.
Mm,
So I see different countries. I think will go down very different trajectories, depending on what they do with economic policy, AI policy, things like that. But what we would see in some countries, which adopt these kinds of things like market intermediaries and agents that really understand your values, and these super negotiators or whatever, is we'd see a feeling among builders and citizens that they kind of can't believe that they used to um, uh, operate the way they used to. I can't believe that I spent that all that time scrolling. I can't believe that I had to sacrifice so many of my values for my first startup, and now with my second startup and these new funding ecosystems and these new ways of doing business. I feel so much better about the trajectory of my second startup. We'd see just a situation where the culture, I mean, I think it's a little bit like Star Trek, right? Star Trek has, like, Starfleet, very
mhm,
high integrity kind of like vibes, right? Like, very much like, well, what's best for this planet, you know? And
mm,
I think currently business mostly feels kind of low integrity. And the closer you get to, like, the strongest financial incentives, it's often more like that.
mhm,
Um, and so that would reverse, and people would feel like their integrity is reinforced by the
mhm.
systems around them.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good concise summary is having a system that reinforces your integrity all while you're able to make a living in the post AI economy. Feels like a beautiful moonshot. The allegory that's coming to mind for me, or the parallel is, and sometimes I find it's useful when thinking about the future to think about the past and like the alignment problems that we've solved in the past. And the one that comes to mind for me is the food system, wherein after World War II, there's a bunch of food scientists. We started building all these different manufactured pieces of food that people consume. They're high in sugar. They're causing diabetes. And at first, there's an incentive to go pursue those short term pleasures, to pursue that sugar. But over time, people realize, oh, I feel more healthy when I have a actual diet of whole foods instead of manufactured foods. And there's sort of like a self correcting mechanism that gets us out of the Moloch trap of just seeking the sugar. And I kind of think about the AI, the attention economy in this way of like, oh, doom scrolling is just like having sugar. And what I really want is the nutritional calories from reading a paper or reading something that's going to nourish my spirit. And maybe there's some sort of allegory here with a post AI economy wherein I'm actually seeking AI that's aligned, that's full stack aligned, as opposed to just telling me what I want or whatever the other failure cases are in AI. I think we're still discovering what they are. But if I were to play back that food system allegory to you as a means of making sense of what it looks like to be successful with AI alignment, is there anywhere you'd push back on that? Do you think that we're seeking the nutritional calories here instead of the low information calories, or would you accept that metaphor?
No, I think the metaphor is good, and it makes me kind of curious why it happened. I think there's a narrative that consumers just wised up, and
Mhm.
I don't really buy that. I think there's a whole bunch of background stuff that happens. Like one was the rise of organic, and this is like very clever business incentive stuff, like deals to put organic shelves in
Okay.
Walmart, stuff like
So
that,
so like
right?
the certified organic labeling and the distribution for it, like, is there gonna be a certified organic for AI, like certified full stack aligned
Yeah, and the
system?
ideal thing, which did not happen in food, is for the whole thing to flop and for there just be clarity,
Mm,
like, this is the right way to do it, and I think that there's some of that happening in food. One way to sort of mentally check it is I think there was a period of time where if you knew somebody worked for a big food company, it sounds kinda evil, right? If you know somebody works for a big, television company, they still sound kinda evil, right? Um, but somehow now, if you know somebody works for a big food company, you don't necessarily think kinda evil, right? So somehow the whole business ecosystem actually recovered. Um, and I
yeah.
think that's, in a way, a much bigger success than, like, just the consumers wising up.
This is, gets me to the point of time preference where, Moloch traps in the short term, in the quarterly business cycle, Moloch traps can really propagate, and they can really dominate a system. But over the long term, it feels like we're in these iterative evolutionary multi-agent systems, complex political economies, and it feels like over time, over the longer arc of time, they bend towards justice, or they bend towards correcting on those short-term Moloch traps. And I'm just wondering if that's what we're going to see in AI. And right now we're in this race, in this grab for market share right now. But if there's a crash and a more reset to medium and long-term priorities, if full stack alignment could become a competitive advantage in that medium and long term, and really get a foothold in the market, I think that time preference maybe plays in favor of things like full stack alignment.
Yeah, I think so too. Another thing is just, I mean, collusion is kind of a dirty word, but I don't think anyone really wants to be in the business of ruining lives, right?
Mhm.
People are forced to do this kind of because there's a CEO position and somebody's got to fill it,
Yeah.
you know.
Or the
Um,
externalities aren't mapped, and, out of sight, out of mind in a globalized world. I think that that's part of it also.
yeah, totally, totally. Um, Yeah, so over time, maybe the externalities get clearer, like people start to measure them. And then over time, in some cases, there's a chance for the business ecosystem to be like, actually, none of us really want to be doing this. We want to be making healthier food. I think even McDonald's is like trying to make healthier food, right? Like, so like, uh, yeah, like, it can either happen or not, and so we really need to work hard to make sure that it happens. But I don't think, the sort of decay is inevitable, and there's a lot of different ways to turn it around.
Yeah. Well, that's a message of hope that I feel comfortable leaving the audience with. Before we break, is there anything I didn't ask that you wanna say?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. If you're out there in the Green Pill audience, please check out Meaning Aligned. The link is in the show notes, and we've got a list of the projects that Joe and his team would love to see builders in the crypto and AI ecosystem working on. So check out the link in the show notes. And Joe, thanks for joining.
Sure thing. Thanks, Kevin.
Alrighty, we just heard from Joe Edelman. Really excited about his new paper on full stack AI alignment. If you want to check out Joe and the paper that he wrote, click the links in the show notes. Really worth your time. Thanks again for listening to the Green Pill podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a friend who cares about building a brighter future. You can find our episodes, articles, and resources at greenpill.network on YouTube or on all podcast platforms. Until next time, keep building, keep experimenting, keep coordinating, and I'll see you next time. Peace.